from republic to democracy. The incentive realignment in America's long descent. Introduction. The silent Second Revolution. America's founding constitutional republic was deliberately constructed as a limited government of enumerated powers, resting on rights endowed by the Creator and subordinated to divine ordinance, a covenantal order where magistrates serve as ministers of justice and sphere sovereignty preserves distinct governing domains of family, church, and state from totalizing intrusion. Yet beginning gradually after Reconstruction and accelerating through the 20th century, the nation has undergone a profound shift toward democracy, a form of civil government characterized foremost by factional identity politics, revolutionary violence and mobbishness, unrestrained government powers, the replacement of God-ordained rights with revocable privileges, and the rise of oligarchs manipulating divided factions for power and privilege, amounting to historical royal lords. This descent manifests plainly today across the spectrum of social norms, statutory law, case law, and bureaucratic rules. From affirmative action programs to include DEI as a successor ideology that allocate opportunities and resources by racial or sexual faction to a tiered taxation system where roughly half the population pays no federal income tax while receiving redistributive grants, effectively plundering one class for another's privilege. In the explosive growth of welfare systems that foster dependency as a factional tool, and in public-private partnerships and stakeholder Soviet capitalism that entwine oligarchic interests with state coercion, we see the fruits of this transition. In the deliberate factionalization along lines of race, black and brown blocs, Latinx blocs and Asian blocs versus white, sexuality and gender blocs, LGBTQ demands, income blocs, poor versus middle and wealthy, and geographic blocs, rural versus urban divides, we see the consequences of this descent. These are not mere policy disputes, but symptoms of incentive realignment. Where the Republic incentivized civic duty and mutual restraint under transcendent ethics, and in the to rule and be ruled in turn spirit, democracy incentivizes short-term plunder, grievance mobilization, and terror against opposing factions. The thesis is clear. The post-Reconstruction slide into democracy has realigned incentives across all actors, citizens divided by identity, institutions, oligarchs, bureaucrats, immigrants, and foreign entities, toward instability and revolutionary capture. Modern distinctions between direct democracy, representative democracy, or any qualified democracy are rejected as a deceptive canard, designed to rehabilitate the term by conflating Republican safeguards, representation, checks, limits, with democratic essence, an essence that truly lacks for the goodness attributed to it. The constitutional republic lacks democracy's central components entirely. Communism, socialism, and fascism are forms of democracy, extending privileges to favored identity factions without restraint, while voting itself is severable from democracy and not native to many of its historical expressions. Subtle egalitarian ideals, imported from European revolutionary thought, have contributed to eroding the Republic's transcendent foundations, softening resistance to unrestrained majoritarian or factional will. This essay examines the definitions from Scripture, ancients such as Aristotle and the American founders, traces the gradual descent, details incentive shifts actor by actor, explores how the linguistic and conceptual supplanting of republican virtues with democracy has enabled revolutionary capture, and concludes with the path of recognition. 2. Defining the forms, God, ancients, and founders. The constitutional republic, as established in America, rests on a transcendent, God-ordained understanding of ordered liberty. Government as a minister of divine justice, limited by sphere sovereignty principles limiting the scope and means of each. These are distinct God-ordained domains, where state intrusion is bounded. Church expression does not wield the sword, but ministers to the conscience, and the family is the foundational unit. Rights are not abstractions, prone to Gnostic reinterpretation, nor manufactured by social consensus, a democratic virtue, but explicitly creator-endowed. Aristotle's definitions of constitutional and republic reigned for millennia before modern obfuscation, finding expression in the founders' separation of powers, enumeration, representation, and further mechanisms towards frustrating excesses, explicitly rejecting democracy as turbulent and incompatible with security of liberties, Madison in Federalist 10, Hamilton's warnings of mob rule. Democracy, by contrast, is the perverted form where the dominant factional alliance rule for self-interest, Aristotle in Politics, descending into licentiousness, factional terror and tyranny, Plato in Republic Book 8-9. Historical expressions, from Athenian demagogues inciting violence against minorities, to Jacobin terror privileging revolutionary factions, to communist vanguard democracy suppressing dissent, reveal its core: identity block mobilization, elevation of demagogues, privilege allocation, and unrestrained coercion. Democracy is not rule by the people in a harmonious sense, but rule by mobilized demos factions against other demos, often violent, always oppressive. The founders uniformly rejected democracy, guaranteeing a republican form in state constitutions and the federal frame in Article 4, Section 4. Modern linguistic subversion, attributing republican virtues to democracy, serves as political warfare, deceiving citizens into accepting factional excess as progress, and the failures are attributable to outside wreckers. Communism, socialism, and fascism fit democracy's essence, extending privileges to favoured identity blocks, proletariat, race, nation, without biblical or republican restraint. Third, the gradual descent, Reconstruction to present. The shift began subtly after the Civil War, with the Reconstruction Amendments, particularly the 14th, serving as entry points for expanding federal unrestraint beyond enumerated bounds, centralizing power, and laying groundwork for later interpretations that eroded state sovereignty and individual rights protections. The Progressive Era accelerated this through the 16th and 17th Amendments, income tax and direct Senate election, establishing an administrative state that bypassed legislative deliberation and began treating government as an instrument for social engineering rather than limited justice and collective defense. This was the origin of the shift from government bound by transcendent ethic to government manufacturing ethic via consensus and manipulation, the Prussian model. The New Deal marked a decisive rupture. Social security, labour regulations, and early welfare programs institutionalized redistribution as privilege allocation, plundering productive classes to buy factional loyalty among the poor and working urban blocs. This expanded unrestrained executive and bureaucratic power, framing the state as provider and parent, rather than a mere terror to the evildoer, wielding the sword in righteous justice. The Great Society under Lyndon Johnson represented the full flowering of democratic excess. The war on poverty exploded welfare programs, aid to families with dependent children, food stamps, Medicaid, fostering multi-generational dependency as a permanent factional tool. Medicare and federal education funding, Elementary and Secondary Education Act, initiated government takeover of spheres traditionally reserved to family, church, and local voluntary civics organizations, centralizing control and indoctrinating in a model where there is no appeal higher than the civil government. Civil rights legislation, while containing Republican elements, increasingly shifted toward privilege allocation, affirmative action precedents, disparate impact, for favored racial factions. What probably should have been tackled as an anti-competitive, cartel-busting undertaking instead enshrined privilege in law based on identity characteristics. Post-1965 changes compounded this. The Immigration and Nationality Act ended national origin preferences, importing new factional blocks for demographic manipulation and ensuring perpetual internal divisions within civil society for oligarchs to exploit. Contemporary developments, stakeholder capitalism enforcing factional mandates through public-private fusion, e.g. ESG frameworks, the further explosion of entitlements and administrative equity initiatives, complete the unbound state, where government functions as deity granting privilege, seizing assets, and tolerating no dissent as it takes up its newfound task of formulating the state mythos. Censorship and information warfare operations against the citizenry become necessary tools here. Imported egalitarian rhetoric, echoing revolutionary European ideals of fraternity unbound by divine ordered hierarchy, softened resistance throughout, portraying unrestraint as compassion and liberation. IFI. Incentive shifts by actor, from republic to democracy, oligarchs, elites. Under the constitutional republic, the production of elites and oligarchs is limited and bounded to competency. Limited pathways for elite success within the prevailing republican order provide a deterrent against severe overproduction and credential inflation. Wealth and influence earned through stewardship within covenantal ethics, sphere sovereignty, and equal rights under divine law, incentivizing long-term investment in civic unity, family cohesion, and social stability, while also serving to keep each variety of elite within their specialized area. Democracy realigns the incentives toward elites becoming Aristotle's demagogues, champions of ethnic combat, who rise by making alliances and retain status through tossing crumbs of privilege to the plebs of their faction. They fund NGOs to perform quasi-governmental functions that merge and compete with the entrenched bureaucracy. Media and political machines mobilize identity blocks to mutual combat that secures privileges for the faction while preventing broad unity against the oligarchs themselves. They raid the institutions to capture the appearance of authority, often via credentialism, as they burn through that banked social capital, hollowing out the structures of civil society, inflating credentials, and collapsing institutional trust. Incentives shift to political power via factional manipulation, incentivizing, in turn, the mass importation of more and more dissimilar identity blocks. Career gains come through cronyism and nepotism, cementing broad royal-like and ethnocentric class structures in the culture. Reduced value is placed on children and family, as social cohesion erodes and focus shifts to selfish indulgence. The destruction of institutions incentivizes the offshoring of savings and disincentivizes reinvestment in America. Legislature. Under a republic, the nature of law is best viewed as a shield, in defense of the liberties of all and restraints on government power. Deliberation and compromise are incentivized among representatives protecting God-ordained rights through enumerated powers, as their mutual checks and cultural ethics deter the worst behaviors. Civic unity is fostered. Social cohesion is strengthened, as the use of the levers of government as a weapon is discouraged. Optimism prevails in stable order. Long-term saving and investing are encouraged. Stability in the currency is maintained as much of the economic sphere remains outside of strict regulation by the civil authority. Democracy shifts law to become a sword with which to coerce weaker factions and plunder the treasury. Demagogic pandering is directed to mobilized factions. Privileges, tax exemptions, subsidies, affirmative mandates are allocated to secure bloc support. Restraint is eroded as factional combat breeds a kill-or-be-killed attitude among the emergent Volkish nations. Political power is pursued via privilege brokering as legislators vie to become oligarchs themselves. Career advancement comes through factional loyalty, wherein impartiality is punished by the voters. Civic unity and social cohesion become fractured, purposely, by both real and imagined transgressions. Fear-driven opportunism replaces optimism, lending towards disloyalty and treason. Spending and plunder replace saving and careful stewardship of public funds. The nuclear family structure is devalued where God-ordained leadership threatens ambitions of the oligarchs. The Republican executive is bounded by strong federalism and legislative checks. It operates as, at most, a truly limited Caesar, wielding the sword with swift severity in those instances of invasion and war, but at rest and merely observing otherwise. Execution is limited to enumerated authority, not imperial global jurisdiction. He serves as Minister of Justice, and deterrence reigns. Restrained political power is incentivized among the other branches in the absence of clear threats to their spheres of authority. Career fidelity to the Constitution is encouraged by transcendent ethic. Civic and social unity are promoted in identifying the only existing threats as external. Strong family cohesion exists under God-ordained leadership, where the head of household can be confident in the head of the executive branch to maintain order within tolerable limits. Under democracy, weakened federalism and legislatures empower the executive as emperor. Expansion occurs via administrative decrees and agencies. Factional privileges are granted, purchasing more power under the branch that already wields the weaponry of government, as the executive becomes effectively top oligarch. A trend towards monarchy emerges, unrestrained by legitimate checks, making the transition to tyranny appear natural and deterministic. Unchecked political power is pursued, but where other oligarchs place some limits on power at home, that executive power is more unbound abroad. Civic and social cohesion become divided as order is not maintained, and eventually, mere survival for the masses becomes a matter of correct factional alignment. Radical swings in policy emerge. Fear of rivals fuels social pessimism. Lavish spending replaces saving. Family emphasis is reduced amid chaos. Headship is eroded by family dependency on factional handouts. Judiciary justices of a republic are seen as weak, not directly wielding the sword, and bound by honor. Neutral interpretation protects equal rights under divine order. Limited political influence is incentivized, as stepping into partisanship risks checks. Career integrity is encouraged. Civic and social unity are promoted. Optimism prevails in just restraint, and judicial decrees that all can abide. Saving and investing occur in stable society with stable law. High-value family planning is supported. Cohesive families exist, absent the factionalization of feminist family courts and critical legal theories. Under democracy, these avatars of justice become factional demagogues, undermining constitutional limits and exerting, as possible, direct control over those who wield the sword. They find themselves unchecked by the weakened legislature. Activist redefinition occurs as living document obfuscatory theories prevail. Privileges are allocated by faction, racial sexual quotas, redistribution rulings, incentivizing yet another class of would-be oligarchs to overreach in the name of our democracy. Factional political power is pursued. Career activism emerges. Unity and cohesion become fractured as the instability of law quickly becomes the instability of all things. Fear-based rulings replace optimism. Judicial decrees to loot the treasury on behalf of their faction become normalized. Family and child value are deprioritized as crisis mentality breeds a get yours while you can attitude. Headship is weakened under policies disfavoring fathers, as fatherhood is an existential threat to both oligarchs and democracy. Bureaucracy, administrative state positions, are very limited under a constitutional republic, as the scope of government is itself limited. The appointed persons are to carry out only the policy of the elected officials in accordance with supreme law, and nothing more or less. Minimal political sway is incentivized, as political and policy concerns are zealously guarded by elected officials. Career service to law is encouraged and honorable. Civic and social harmony are promoted by the dearth of civil government interference into private affairs. Productive saving and investing are supported, as the scope of bureaucracy limits plunder. Strong familial bonds and headship exist, as in the absence of a bureaucratic expert class decisions and solutions are devolved to the family level. Under democracy, the bureaucracy explodes as the scope of government does. Protections on individual rights dissipate. Elected members of government lean more on the permanent bureaucracy to accomplish policy in an illegitimate manner than via the legitimate mechanisms of policy and lawmaking. Bureaucracy is weaponized for factional enforcement, regulatory harassment of disfavored groups, privilege distribution via agencies. Entrenched political power is pursued by stashing partisan oligarchs in exile within the bureaucracy. Career permanence comes via factionalism. Unity and cohesion become divided. Fear of reform replaces optimism, as the uselessness of the bureaucratic functionary is tacitly acknowledged. Family focus is reduced and leadership is eroded as the bureaucracy arises as a powerful faction and replacement of the provider and protector. Higher education. Under a republic, higher education incentivizes inculcation of virtue and reason within its sphere. Political restraint and moderation are fostered. Career merit is promoted, where ideas are tested instead of insulated. Civic and social unity are strengthened. Optimism prevails as technologies are driven by sincere inquiry. Saving and investing occur in knowledge production. Cohesive families exist under God-ordained leadership, unthreatened by the educated or educators. Democracy shifts incentives to indoctrination in grievance. Youth are mobilized as revolutionary factions easily dispatched as cannon fodder. Political activism dominates. Career comes via credentialism and factional alignment absent competency. Unity and cohesion become fractured. Fear-mongering is incentivized through grant-making, writing, towards studying, foremost, issues that can drive more spending and plunder. Fractured patriotism emerges under financially incentivized foreign interference. God-ordained leadership is undermined through relational ideologies and the necessary destruction of the family that enables oligarchs to remain unthreatened. Economics, business. The Republic incentivizes free enterprise bounded by rights and transcendent ethics, wherein freedom to trade most categories of goods is unrestricted within the geography of a political entity, and foreign trade balances national security with the realities of comparative advantage. Political neutrality is promoted. Innovation is encouraged and rewarded by the market. Civic and social cohesion are strengthened. Optimistic growth prevails as wealth increases. Saving and domestic investing are supported. Strong family planning and child value exist as heads of household have consistent quality employment. Familial stability is maintained as roles are fostered and reinforced. Democracy shifts to crony privileges via partnerships. Democratic replacement immigration drives down wages and increases demands on both legitimate economics and welfare, and cements ethnic in-group preference that excludes natural-born citizens from whole sectors of economics. Political alliances are incentivized to avoid the wrong side of regulatory capture. Career cronyism emerges and significantly saps efficiencies. Unity and cohesion become division and anger. Privileges for many become the status quo and drive single-issue voting blocks around grievances. Spending on influence replaces savings, and offshoring hides funds abroad to avoid domestic pillaging. Family focus is reduced, as children for many outside the welfare benefit classes become significant economic burdens. God-ordained leadership is weakened. NGOs, media, voluntary civil society incentivizes apolitical aid and education under a republic. Productive citizenship is promoted. Career service is encouraged. Unity and cohesion are strengthened. Family emphasis and God-ordained leadership are maintained and strengthened. NGOs arise as factional warfare arms under democracy, amplifying sophistry and terror against opponents, teaching the tradecraft of revolution to cadres and recruiting the masses as fodder. Political propaganda dominates. Career activism emerges. Unity and cohesion become fractured. Fear-mongering is incentivized. Spending on narratives dominates. Family is deprioritized if not targeted for destruction. God-ordained leadership is eroded. Through taxpayer funding, a perpetual soft landing job prospect is provided for members of the regime in temporary exile from governing. Citizen factions, black, brown factions. Equal standing under transcendent law and constitutional order incentivizes assimilation and civic duty under a republic, where speaking the same language and performing the same customary habits lends towards trust and fosters relationships. Political participation is for unity and fortifying boundaries of government. Career merit is promoted. Social cohesion is strengthened, where commonalities in religion, trade, and ethics dominate differences in colour and origin. Optimism prevails in greater equality. Saving and investing are encouraged. High-value family planning is supported. Cohesive families and God-ordained leadership exist absent democratic targeting for factionalization. Mobilization for racial privileges, affirmative action, reparations demands, is pursued under democracy. Dependency and grievance against other factions are fostered. Bloc political power is pursued around Volkish nationalism and collective consciousness. Career comes via quotas, and unemployment is incentivized. Cohesion becomes fractured, fear of oppression dominates, and in short years brain drain renders broad swaths unsuited to meritocratic advancement. Spending on immediate needs replaces saving. Child value is reduced amid instability, except where incentivized by welfare benefits. Headship is weakened, as government replaces the role of the father in providing. White factions' duty to ordered liberty without special privilege incentivizes unified political restraint under a republic. Career effort is promoted. Social cohesion is strengthened. Optimism prevails in merit. Saving and investing are encouraged. Intentional family and child value are supported. Strong headship exists. Colorblind meritocracy is maintained as mutually beneficial, absent coercive plunder. Defensive grievance or retreat emerges under democracy as redistribution and mandates plunder or marginalize. Resentful political backlash is incentivized. Career barriers arise in the presence of replacement immigration, racial quotas, and ethnic bloc capture of industries. Cohesion becomes division. Fear of displacement dominates and disincentivizes both effort and investment. Spending on defensive categories over saving predominates. Family is deprioritized in the presence of extreme sex-linked divisions. Headship is eroded in the presence of hedonistic feminism and egalitarianism. Finally, the rise of a white identity political bloc embraces whatever means necessary to secure a future, and with it, the rise of white identity oligarchs alters the political landscape. LGBTQ factions. Civil liberty within moral bounds and private practices incentivizes privacy and public decency under a republic. Optimism prevails in tolerance, elevating limits of civil government. Saving and investing are encouraged. Grievances are oriented to the church instead of the state, thereby maintaining sphere sovereignty and keeping the sword out of the debate. Privileges, mandated recognition, quotas, celebration, are pursued under democracy. Cultural rupture is mobilized against traditional spheres. Political demands dominate and disempower the church sphere as it contracts under the threat of the sword. Grievance is directed to the state to dismantle the family sphere in equity with those who cannot produce a natural family. Career comes via identity as a credential through standpoint epistemology and factional capture of institutions. Cohesion becomes fractured. Fear of backlash dominates while becoming ever more incentivized. Spending on advocacy is prioritized. Family is devalued by sales of children to those unable to naturally produce their own. Ever greater public transgression of transcendent order and ethics is incentivized. Poor factions. Opportunity under equal rights generates capacity for earning for nearly all persons under a republic, with wages guides by fair market conditions. Stable careers are promoted. Social cohesion is strengthened in institutions shared among all. Optimism prevails in predictability. Saving and investing habits are encouraged. Family planning with high child value is supported through affordability. Cohesive headship exists even in lower classes. Responsible charity is readily available via civil society and church organizations. Dependency on redistributive privileges is fostered under democracy. Voting blocs expand welfare plunder. Entitlement politics dominate. Career stagnation emerges in the presence of replacement immigration. Pathways are blocked for those who cannot afford education towards credentials, locking the capable but disadvantaged out of the upper classes and elites. Fear of cuts dominates. Spending replaces saving. Large, low-value families increase welfare benefits. God-ordained leadership is severely weakened in the inability to provide for one's own family and reliance on systems of plunder and factionalism. Middle-class factions. Stability through work and duty incentivizes balanced politics under a republic. Career advancement is promoted according to merit. Civic and social unity are strengthened in shared institutions. Optimism prevails in security and stability. Saving and investing are encouraged. Deliberate family planning and high child value are supported. Strong headship exists. Squeezing by tiered taxation and plunder is experienced under democracy, especially during the earlier phases where middle-class wealth represents the bulk of the treasury. Resentment or alignment with privilege seekers by adopting flexible identities is incentivized. Defensive politics dominate, and withdrawal from institutions occurs. Career insecurity emerges in the presence of replacement immigration and ethnic capture. Cohesion becomes fractured. Fear of decline dominates. Spending cuts replace investing and hoarding of necessities is observed. Family size is reduced. Family leadership is weakened. Wealthy factions. Stewardship incentivizes restrained politics under a republic, as well as charity and investment in shared institutions. Innovation is promoted. Unity and cohesion are strengthened. Optimism prevails in legacy building and assured inheritance. Saving and investing are encouraged. Entrepreneurship is supported. High-value family planning is maintained. Strong family leadership exists. Alignment with oligarchs for crony protections or factional competition is pursued under democracy. Manipulative politics dominate. Masses are divided by identity to protect the wealth of the elites, while the demagogues constantly shake them down. Fear of taxation leads to hiding wealth overseas. Unstable families emerge. Family leadership is weakened. Incentives shift to pleasure-seeking hedonism and licentiousness, and investment in destructive paradigms. Rural factions' autonomy in isolated geography incentivizes local politics under a republic. Self-reliance is promoted. Social cohesion is strengthened. Optimism prevails in independence and acquired skill sets. Saving and investing in land occur for high efficiency and productivity. Large and high-value families are supported. Strong headship exists. Marginalization by urban-dominated privileges, regulatory burdens, cultural disdain is experienced under democracy. Isolationist politics dominate. Career obstacles arise. Cohesion becomes fractured. Fear of erasure and asset seizure dominates. Spending is defensive. Family emphasis is reduced. Headship is eroded. Heavy reliance on subsidies emerges. Urban factions' ordered community incentivizes integrated politics under a republic. Career opportunity is promoted. Unity and cohesion are strengthened. Optimism prevails in diversity and unity in patriotism, civics and religion towards a common future. Saving and investing are encouraged. Balanced family and child value are supported. Strong family leadership exists under traditional institutions. Mobilization for revolutionary paradigms is pursued under democracy. Identity-dominant politics dominate. Career comes via networks and taxpayer-funded schemes. Divisions are incentivized and culturally ingrained. Spending on trends and demonstrating wealth power is prioritized. Child value is low outside of increased government benefits. Family is weakened. Non-citizen actors. Immigrants' incentives to assimilate to ordered liberty and covenantal society exist for freedom and opportunity under a republic. Political integration is encouraged, even if not in the first generation. Merit is promoted and incentives are aligned. Civic and social unity are strengthened. Optimism prevails, as do grateful attitudes. Saving and investing are supported. Strong family planning and child value are maintained. Cohesive headship exists. Mass importation as factional blocks for divide and conquer strategies is pursued under democracy, and incentives are realigned away from opportunity towards welfare and graft. Demographics are altered for power. Identity-ethnic bloc politics dominate. Identity quotas emerge. Cohesion becomes fractured. Fear of exclusion dominates. Spending replaces saving. Large, low-value families emerge. Family structure is eroded. Foreign enemy state actors and terrorist groups' deterrence via limited social attack surface and strong sovereignty exists under a republic. Cohesion in civil society is maintained. Avoidance of kinetic conflict is incentivized. Minimal political leverage is possible through subversion. Unity against threats is strengthened. Optimism prevails in security. Saving for defense is encouraged. Trust exists in distributed and decentralized defensive capacity. Strong family protection and headship are maintained. Exploitation of unrestraint, proxies, lobbies, open borders for infiltration is pursued under democracy. Amplified political disruption dominates. Careers in subversion emerges. Cohesion fractures. Fear exploitation is incentivized. Spending on subversive operations is prioritized. Invasion by both asymmetric and tradition methods becomes a greater possibility. Allied nations' mutual respect for sovereignty incentivizes cooperative politics under a republic. Alliances are promoted for deterrence. Civic and social harmony are strengthened internally through expectations of peace. Optimism prevails in partnerships. Saving and investing occur jointly. Leverage of internal factions for concessions is pursued under democracy. Opportunistic politic